Hi guys, I'm Amanda from the blog Simply Maggie, where I bring you all of the latest arm knitting tutorials. And today I'm going to show you how to arm knit the linen stitch. I have a swatch here, and you can kind of see how it's different from the usual stitch that everyone teaches. The usual stitch, which is just the basic knit stitch, is this one here, so you can see. This one, the one that I'm going to teach you today, is a tighter knit, so it has smaller holes in it. Or one of the questions I get a lot is there a way to prevent the large holes? And you can by using a thicker yarn, but with this one you can use thinner yarn and you still have a nice looking stitch with small holes. So let's get right into it. So what I did was I pulled a strand from the center of the skein and a strand from the outside. I went ahead and put my skein of yarn on the floor, that way it's not rolling around in my lap. And I pulled a tail of about 4 feet from my skein of yarn. We're going to cast on 20 stitches all together, but first we have to make our slip knot. So to make a slip knot, you're going to drape the yarn over your hand, pinch those two sides together, and then put your hand in it and grab the working yarn. And the working yarn is the one that's coming from the skein of yarn. This one is the tail, okay? So we have the working yarn and we have the tail of yarn. So now we've put the slip knot onto our right arm, and just tighten that up a little bit by pulling those two strands, okay? And we're gonna slide that up and we're gonna begin casting on our 20 stitches. So to cast on your stitches, I'm gonna show you how to do the long tail cast on method, which is just a more secure way of casting on. You're gonna have like a tighter edge. It's just gonna look better. Okay, so to cast on, I'm gonna show you how to hold the yarn in your hand. Take the working yarn, place it in between your middle finger and your index finger, okay, to hold it in place. And then wrap it around the outside of your index finger. Take your ring finger and your pinky and hold it in place just like that. And then you're going to take the tail end of the yarn and you're going to grab it and hold it with your ring finger and your pinky as well. And then you're going to take your thumb and wrap it around the inside of that, just like that. So that's probably really confusing at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's very simple. So now we have our working yarn here, our tail end of our yarn here, and now we're going to cast on our second stitch since the slip knot counted as our first stitch. So hold the yarn just like this, like I showed you. You're going to take your index finger of your right hand. You're going to go under this one, okay, over this one, and we're going to grab this one. So take your index finger, put it under this one, over the one in the middle, and grab that one in the back and pull it up to create this new loop right here, and you're going to slide that on to your arm. Take your index finger, go under this one, over this one, and grab this one with your index finger. So we're going to go under, over, and grab that one and pull it up, creating this new loop right here, and we're going to put that onto our arm. So now we have 3 stitches. Move those up and keep doing this until you have a total of 20 stitches. So you go under, over, and grab that yarn. Okay, under, over, and grab the last strand, and just keep sliding these onto your arm. And this is what it looks like when you have 20 stitches on your arm. Okay, and don't be afraid, like if they start to go down onto your hand, that's okay. I couldn't move them up anymore on my arm, so a couple of them are on the bottom part of my hand, and that's fine. So now that we have the casting on part of the project done, we're going to move on to knitting our stitches. And since I'm showing you how to do the linen stitch today, it's going to be a little different than the normal arm knitting stitch. So what you want to do to knit the linen stitch is knit one. Okay, so to knit one, you're going to hold the working yarn in your right hand, take that first stitch and pull it over and off while still holding the working yarn. So now you have this new loop here. You're going to turn it towards yourself and put it onto your other arm. Now this first stitch is always the hardest one to tighten. Kind of looks like a mess right here, and if you just pull on that working yarn, it doesn't really do much. So you want to push up on this knot while you're kind of pulling on the working yarn. So just keep pushing that up until it's as far up as it can go. Now we're going to knit our second stitch, and this is where you start the linen stitch. So I'm going to pick up the skein of yarn and keep it in my lap now. Okay, so we have the skein of yarn, and we have our one stitch on our left hand, the rest of our stitches on our right hand. What you're going to do is take the yarn, the skein of yarn, and put it to the back of your work, okay, and onto your lap. So now this working yarn here, you can see is in the back of your work. I hope that makes sense. So what you're going to do next is drop that working yarn. You're going to take the next stitch, slip it off of your hand without knitting it, and put it onto your other arm. Okay? The next step is to take that skein of yarn again, put it back to the front of your work. So you're just lifting it over your work. You're going to tighten up that last stitch that you just made a little bit. You're going to hold the working yarn in your right hand, and you're going to knit the next stitch. So take that next stitch, pull it over and off while still holding the working yarn. Turn that stitch towards you and place it onto your other arm, and tighten it up as much as you can. Okay? Just keep moving those stitches up your arm so that they don't get in the way of making new stitches. The next step is to take your skein of yarn, and we're again gonna just lift it over and put it to the back of the work, so that now this working yarn is in the back of this work closer to you. We're gonna drop that, and we're gonna slip our next stitch. So take your next stitch, pull it over, and put it on to your other arm. Okay, so you're just slipping it, you're not actually knitting it. Now we're going to take our skein and put it to the front of our work. So you're just lifting it over and putting it to the front of your work. You're going to knit your next stitch. So hold the working yarn in your right hand, pull that next stitch over and off. You have this new loop, so you're going to turn it towards yourself and put it onto your left arm. Tighten it up as much as you can. So now we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, and we're just going to keep doing that. You're going to be moving the yarn just from the front to the back. When the skein's in the front and when the working yarn is in the front of your work, you're going to knit a stitch. When you pick up the skein of yarn and move it to the back and the working yarn is in the back of your work closer to you, you're going to slip a stitch. I'm just going to keep going here, and I'll show you the result at the end of the first row. slip your last stitch, okay? So we've completed our first row. It obviously doesn't look like anything now because we've only done one row, but once you get to about row 5 or 6 with the linen stitch, it'll start to look like something, and you'll notice the difference in the stitch rather than the regular knit stitch. So we finished our first row. Everything's on our left arm. Now we're going to go ahead, knit our second row, and move everything back over to our right arm. So you're going to hold the working yarn in your left hand, pull that first stitch over. You have this new loop here. Turn that towards yourself and place it onto your other arm. And tighten that up the best you can. Now we're going to take the skein of yarn again, pick it up and put it over your work so that the working yarn is now in the back of your work, okay? And you're going to slip a stitch. So take that stitch off of your left hand and just slide it over to your right hand. Okay? Pick up the skein of yarn, move it to the front, and now you're going to knit a stitch. So hold the working yarn in your left hand, take that next stitch and pull it over and off while still holding the working yarn. You have this new loop, turn it towards yourself, and put it onto your right arm. Okay, pick up the skein of yarn, flip it over to the back, drop your working yarn, and slip your next stitch. And things might seem to get a little bit bunched up, but that's okay, because once it gets a little bit longer, it'll be easier to just tug on it and unbunch it. So if you ever forgot what you did last, you can go to the beginning of your row and count. You always start with a knit, and you always end with a slip. Okay, so what we have here is a knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip. Okay, so we did a slip last, so we're going to move our yarn to the front and knit the next stitch. You can also tell by every knit stitch has this little bump on it. This is a knit, okay, this is a slip, so you can kind of see the difference there. And with the linen stitch, you're basically knitting your slips and slipping your knits, and you'll kind of figure that out over the course of the project. So now we're going to knit the next stitch, and then we're going to slip a stitch. So see how on the last row we knit this one, and now we're going to slip it, and you're going to put your yarn to the front. On the last row we slipped this one, and now we're going to knit it. And all of these different steps are what creates the look of the linen stitch. So now we have 2 rows. We're going to go on to our 3rd row and just do the same thing that we did with our last 2 rows. Start with a knit. So knit your first stitch, tighten it up, pick up your skein of yarn, okay, move it to the back and slip. Move it to the front, tighten that last stitch up, and knit. Now you want to make sure you're grabbing the right one because these can kind of overlap. So make sure you're knitting your slips and slipping your knits. So you can see here that this one that I'm about to work is a slip. The next one next to it is a knit. So we're going to knit our slip, move to the back, and slip our knit stitch. It's gonna get kind of bunched up because this is a tight stitch. It's a tight knit stitch. So really just pull on it really good so it stretches it out. Okay, and we're just gonna keep knitting. I'm gonna show you what I have so far. This is what I have, and this was 19 rows. So I finished my 20th row, and the way I was keeping track of my rows was writing them down on a notepad. And now I can go ahead and cross off, making it 5, 10, 15, 20 rows. And if you ever need to get up in the middle of a project and take care of something around the house, or you know, whatever you might have to do, just move all of your stitches, knit all of your stitches over to one arm, and then I just flip the project over my arm, pick up my ball of yarn and bring it with me, and